Welcome to the podcast. My name is Father Bill W. I'm an Episcopal priest. I live here in Austin, Texas, and have had the gift of recovery since December the 27th of 1972. Very, very grateful for that gift, and it really is a gift. If we don't appreciate that, I think we're missing part of what the program is really all about. Purpose of these podcasts is to try to go deeper into 12-step recovery. I like to touch on the spirituality, the history, and the psychology that underlie the 12 steps and help on our spiritual journey. And did, in my own research, discover a form of prayer called two-way prayer that was done in the Oxford group and in the very early days of AA. Never did quite make it by identification into the program, but I think it's really all over the program. I'm in the process of writing a book on that, and more will be revealed on that subject. But anyway, go to the website. It's called Two-Way Prayer. You'll learn about it, and lots of handouts there that you can download and teach you the practice. Okay, last thing is that these podcasts are now going up on YouTube. So we do have a YouTube channel, and it is called Two-Way Prayer also. So go check us out. We've started here a new series. It's called Unshakable Foundations in Recovery. And my guest is Tyler D. from Dallas, Texas. And in addition to being in 12-step recovery for some number of years, Tyler is an advanced yoga teacher, and she specializes also in trauma work and is a mindfulness teacher and a relapse prevention facilitator. She recently completed some advanced work in spiritual direction at SMU, Southern Methodist University up there in Dallas, at the Perkins School of Theology. And she leads spirituality workshops, provides workshops in spiritual direction for folks around the country and through the wonderful world of Zoom, now doing it around the world. So recently got back from an ashram in India. Maybe we'll hear a little bit about what she learned there. So Tyler, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, Father Bill. It's a real blessing to be here. Thank you.
Good. And in the last episode, you read a passage from 12 Steps and 12 Tradition, the book that Bill Wilson wrote. And it's kind of the background for this little series we're doing. Here's the quote. It says, "There is a direct linkage among self-examination, meditation, and prayer. But when they are logically related and interwoven, the result is an unshakable foundation for life." So we're going to be examining those three, and today we're going to take a deep dive into the first one of those, which is self-examination. And maybe you could begin by telling us why you think self-examination or mindfulness or watchfulness, goes by many names. Why is it so important in recovery?
Thank you. Yeah, when we first started discussing this project together, and I was thinking about those three things and noticing, in the book, it does list self-examination as the first of the three. And so naturally, I figured we'd start with that one. And sort of in the back of my mind, I was thinking, well, it's kind of the easiest, right? We can talk about that and kind of get that one out of the way. But, this past week, as I was preparing for today and really just thinking about how challenging self-examination is. And I thought I would Google a couple of fun quotes, and I just put in self-knowledge in the Google search engine. And what popped up for me from every wisdom teacher and Benjamin Franklin, you name it, across the globe, hands down, self-knowledge is the most challenging thing one can undertake. And it really hit me just the importance of this step. And I think it might sort of look like a couple of things. So what we start with is this self-examination, or maybe it's self-awareness. And once we become aware, then maybe we can start to examine. And then once we've sort of examined, then there is a sense of there's self-knowledge. Like there's a little bit of a I think there's a little bit of a progression in
Mhm.
all of that. I was just reading again this morning in our literature, and it talks about this thought brings us to step 10, and this is on page 84. I don't know why I've read this passage. I cannot tell you how many times, but it really struck me how important this is, and how it says this is something that it's going to continue for our lifetime. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. And we watch for these things. We immediately ask God to remove them. This is something that I have this new appreciation for and new revelation for, the importance of self-examination as a daily practice, as we set aside time in the morning. I women that I get to sponsor in the program, I'm always suggesting, upon arising and when we retire at night, which is on page 86 at our book. But that really comes right around this step 10, and that's something that I suggest that people start very early on.
It comes earlier in step one.
Mm,
And
yeah,
maybe we could kind
absolutely.
of run through the
Mm,
steps, because there's a
yeah.
progression that's going on there.
Yes.
And Jung
Yes.
talked about, and a number of spiritual teachers talk about an awareness of like two selves.
Mm, mm,
And God knows, I had this experience when I hit my bottom and I heard a voice speaking to me. And it wasn't my ego voice,
mm,
it was another voice. You could call it the observer voice. Some spiritual teachers look at it that way, but it's a voice that, or the observer, or this self-examination that is kind of stepping aside from the normal ego and looking in at it.
mm,
And that happens in step one, doesn't it?
mm. Yes, yes, I would absolutely agree with that, but I didn't know it at the time. I
Right.
didn't
Oh no, hell, we don't know what's
know.
going on at the time. We don't,
Yeah,
am I going
at the time.
crazy?
Yes, exactly. Because the voice of my inner critic was so loud, and that was the voice that I constantly paid attention to. And
Yeah.
that voice, so any voice that was coming to me, even early on, I was very untrusting, because the voice that I was so used to hearing
Yeah.
all of my life was the voice of my inner critic.
Yeah.
Um,
I
and
heard a different one.
did you?
Yeah, and it wasn't my inner critic.
Okay.
It was quite loving.
Yeah.
And what it said to me is, there's something wrong with you,
Mm,
me.
mm,
But it said it lovingly.
yeah.
And it said it at almost as an invitation to begin looking at that other self
Mm,
and begin following a path of recovery, which was the discovery of a newer self, a different
mm,
self,
yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And that makes
mm,
a great point, because I believe with all my heart, and I touched on this last time, that the God of our understanding is going to show up to each and every one of us very differently. The God of
right.
our understanding is going to show up in a way that we can understand.
Yeah.
And, for me, um, as I talked about, I always had this belief in God, but God was very far removed. God was always out there somewhere.
Right.
And I didn't have the type of relationship that I could recognize that voice. I could trust that voice. I didn't have the experience, the God experience. I'm sure that voice was there, and I simply didn't recognize it.
Yeah, I didn't know who the hell it was, and I didn't pay that much attention to it. I mean, it
Yeah,
wasn't like I had a
yeah.
revelation.
Right.
It
But
was.
what I think this program does, and it did for me, and I've seen it before with other people, God knew that I didn't know. God knew I didn't know. And so therefore, God had to send me someone, and that
Mhm.
person came in the form of a sponsor.
Yes. Yes.
And
To whom we give almost godlike status.
And she knows who she is, and I hope she's listening because I love her dearly. Yeah.
Right.
And she reiterated the voice that I was hearing. She was also very honest, but even in her honesty, which stung in the beginning, there was a truth there that I knew. I knew in my soul. And those were truths that I could look back on and sort of hear again that loving God just telling me, that I have this ability to be honest. I have this ability. I am worthy. I am, those things that I never believed myself. I will just say that my sponsor early on was that voice for me, really reiterating, and also that recognizing that I'm powerless over alcohol. That's a recognition. That's something else in me. That's an observer. And I had my sponsor to reinforce the voice or the thought or the intuitive, however that is, that knowing. We all have that knowing. That first step is the most critical of all the self-examination. And then we have to be able to, that self-knowledge, and it becomes knowledge, and it becomes a working part of who we are. Right.
Yeah, and the depth of that, either you call it powerless or unmanageability. I tend towards the unmanageability side of the thing. The depth of that is phenomenal.
Yes.
And this is really the ongoing journey, that there's kind of a spiritual warfare going on. Who's going to be in charge? Am I listening to the frightened ego voice, which is filled with critic, inner critic? I mean, that's his second name, but the beginning of another reality, another voice, another. It's that fourth dimension of existence that the book talks about.
Yes, absolutely it is. And boy, how hard is it for us to receive that goodness, right? There again, it's that thing of like, am I worthy? Someone is actually, they're a force, there's a source that's giving me this love and this self-compassion that I truly don't feel deserving of. It's a crazy thing. And which is why I always say, early on, sitting in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I had to let those people love me until I could love myself. 100%. So I think from the first day that we step into a meeting, we begin this process of self-examination. And we do that by listening to other people's stories. Now, we hate to admit it, but we're always comparing ourselves. I know I did. And my sponsor several times said, Tyler, look for the similarities and not the differences. But in doing that, I was able to see myself in other people. All throughout the room. That's self-examination. So I love that we're offered that opportunity early on. Every person in that room is a reflection to some degree of who I am. And I think that actually has not only to do with people in the fellowship, that has to do with every single person. The woman that I just encountered at the grocery store, right? It's gotten to that point, but this is where it started. This is why this program is so beautiful and it's so powerful. And maybe we don't even understand the subtleties of how this really works.
Right.
It's incredible. So that first step.
It's a waking up. It's a waking up.
Oh, and it's profound is what it is.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
In step two, it's we're becoming conscious of the strength in the relationship with this higher power. So I think in step two, when we have this idea that there is a power that's greater than us that's going to restore us, right?
At least it's possible.
Yeah. Now this relationship begins. Now this source that's going to restore us. And I think of sanity. The word sanus, right? It means health, right? Although I was the craziest person around, I had a really hard time. I knew I was an alcoholic and I was powerless, but I was a really hard time, which is crazy. But I thought, wow, you know what? This power can restore me to health, and that was very attractive to me, because I was struggling in many areas. I think step 2 offers us the opportunity to have this relationship and to name the voice, name the guidance, name the observer, name the witness, whatever you want to
Mhm.
sort of. And so I began to trust. I began to sort of listen. Again, throughout all of this, I'm attending meetings, right? I'm talking with my sponsor once a week. 90 meetings, 90 days. I did 138 meetings in 90 days. Not that I was trying to kill it or impress anybody. I was terrified.
Yeah.
Absolutely terrified. I met with my sponsor once a week. I called her every day, 90, and sometimes more. So, these gifts, this program is, honestly, I'm meeting with a friend. I said, hands down, if we're really wanting to do this work and walk this spiritual path, I think it is the most comprehensive way to do that. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, very few spiritual paths give you a very precise set of steps to take to
Right,
lead you on the journey.
right.
This one
It's
does.
and so many opportunities,
Yeah.
um, meetings and all of that. And I do want to sort of mention, at this point, one of the things that I heard early on in the rooms was, we can't read the label of the jar we're in, and that stuck with me. That has been one of my biggest truths. And so what I've learned and looking back is how God just sent these incredible label readers into my life,
Mhm.
starting, with my sponsor. And we're all in a jar. We're all in a jar. We're all in the jar of this personality, this container of ego, and it contains all of our fears and everything that, we think keeps us safe and all of that. And but what's really going on? So, I think about, all of the ways and people and events that happen, and we talk about the miracles in recovery, and it has simply been my experience that, number one, nobody knows us better than God knows us, and God will always provide what is best for us, and keeping an open mind about that, and and really being willing that how it works, honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. And we have to have all three of those. I'm convinced that how it works in this program is how it works for everything. I use that acronym in every aspect of my life.
Yeah.
Um,
In the self-examination,
mm,
we then come up against step 4,
yes,
which is a big one for
yes,
many people in 12-step
yes.
recovery.
Yes.
You
And if I
know,
could just back up 1 second, because I want to make a point about step 3.
okay, sure.
We make a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the
Yeah.
care of God. And I think this is super interesting. So now we're actually beginning to make that list of what is, and I was told in my journey that will and are my thoughts and my actions. Aha. Now we're getting somewhere. We are naming our thoughts and we are naming our actions. So our will and our life.
Right.
And this for me was key, because I had a God box early on in my recovery.
Right.
And I was able to write down my thoughts and my actions every morning.
And you can examine them.
Yes, you can.
You know,
That's right. That's an awareness.
exactly.
That's an awareness. We become aware. That's a
Of
thought.
this, we become aware of the split,
Mhm,
that there are two selves,
mhm,
the surrendered, aligned self and the ego self that wants to dominate.
mm,
We've gone through a surrender process,
mm,
but I don't know that we've effected a full surrender, alignment,
mm.
realignment with that power. And that's where I think the self examination comes in. Where am I coming from?
mm,
at this moment?
mm.
Ernie Larson used to have an expression, who's driving the bus?
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
very helpful. Who's driving the bus?
Yes.
Is it the surrendered self? Who's driving the bus? Who's trying to align with this power inside? Or is it this frightened little ego
Mm,
who's grabbed the wheel? You
mm.
know? So watchfulness.
Yeah, we become very aware. And, I guess for me, I'm probably not as smart as you are or were or am, but I I needed this physical thing of like, God, here it was almost like, toddler. I'm turning my this thought about this meeting that I'm going to be having with this person today. I'm going to give that to you in the box. And I'm giving that to you in the box. I'm giving that to you in the box. And then, sort of I'd go through the day. So there was something pretty powerful about that. Um, that would remind me throughout the day, oh yeah, turn that over to God. That's God. No, that God's got that one. But I've heard there's a whole lot of will catch back and forth, right? Here you go, God. And then you're like taking it back again.
Right.
So how many times do we sort of do that through the day? But at that point, I was simply still, I think for me, it was
Yeah.
sort of, there was a me and there was a God. There,
Yeah.
there wasn't the
But what are you
consciousness.
doing now? What are you doing now? Are
Mm,
you're still watching now, correct?
mm. Of course. Of course, I am. I
Yeah.
am, but I have an alignment
Uh-huh.
now,
Yes.
and I have what I believe and call a God consciousness,
Right.
that it's no longer, it doesn't feel like
Hmm.
two separate things. I don't feel like God is out there or in a box somewhere.
But is egotism not still alive in you?
Of course,
And
absolutely it is
are you not needing to be watchful of that?
every second of every
Yeah,
day.
see, that's what I'm kind of
Okay.
trying to get to here.
But I didn't know that on step
No,
3.
you don't know
Oh,
that in the
okay. Okay.
beginning. You
Mm,
don't know that at the beginning.
mm,
Uh,
yes.
but you haven't solved it either.
Mm,
You know,
mm.
I mean, it's not like it's over and done with. I've
And
surrendered and off I go. No,
that's our lifelong pursuit.
that's
And it
right.
says right here, this is it should continue for our lifetime.
Right. That's right.
So um that's probably, I feel certain, is what it will happen for me. However, it seems like the distance, and this is the longest 1.5 feet in the world, is the distance from our head to our heart.
Exactly.
And I
Hmm.
love that quote, and I don't know who said it,
Hmm.
but that just came up yesterday in a meeting I had with a client, and we were talking about that. But it's a much shorter distance. I notice when I'm in my head, I feel that friction, I feel the
Right.
tension. And I used to say, I don't always know when I'm in God's will. I
Yeah.
always know when I'm not.
That's right. That's right. I got an insight, and it wasn't all that long ago. I'm ashamed to
Yeah,
say this,
yeah.
but because we talk in the program about being restless, irritable, and discontent, as if those are terrible things. And good
Mm,
Lord, if you're a good little 12-stepper, you shouldn't be feeling restless, irritable, and discontent.
mm,
Well, yes, you should,
mm,
because that's what's telling you
mm,
I've
mm.
drifted away.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
listen to it, pay attention. And there's the examination.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. And it becomes, with practice,
right.
right? It becomes a working part of our life. And those words are from our literature.
That's
And
right.
this idea of we grow in understanding and effectiveness.
Right.
Well, the more we understand, the more effective we can, and so now for me, the distance from here to here is much shorter, and it's connected, and I have that ability to, the resource, the source is not outside of me. It's not a long
That's right.
distance call.
That's right. The two selves are
Mm,
coming into closer alignment,
mm,
and there's a sense of wholeness
yes.
that comes with that. And the spiritual world is part of that. And people are a part of that.
Yes.
And even my little ego self, it's not the enemy.
Yeah.
I can look at it and laugh at it
Mhm.
because I think that's what God
Yeah.
does.
Yeah. I love our literature says there is a proper use of the will.
Right.
And that is in our book. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. And the
For sure.
proper use of the will is to be willing.
Mhm. Yeah.
Now, the improper use of the will
Yes.
is to be, I'm
To let it drive
gonna
the bus.
drive the bus. Get out of this, get out of that seat. I'm in charge. And that's the ongoing
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're right. It takes time. I'm not there in the beginning. I'm relying on other people, but it does grow.
And and we're going to touch on this later, but it says in that reading in the 12 and 12, which you began with, it says, given each one of these self-examination, prayer, and meditation, when they're practiced on their own, they bring some
They're good. Yeah, they're nice.
effectiveness.
Right.
But when they're logically interwoven, and this is ooh, it just gives me, I'm so nerdy and goosebumpy about that, like
Right.
it gets me like so, ooh,
So
I get,
what you're saying is the watchfulness leads automatically to prayer. Or it should. It can.
it
Yeah.
could, yes.
Yeah. That's the direction.
Mm,
Because it either goes back into the ego, and the watchfulness creates
mm,
anxiety and more control, or
mm,
a repeat of the surrender, of the letting
mm,
go, of the realignment of the self with the greater self. Someone who really helped me
mm,
is Tom Powers, and Tom Powers was the author of a wonderful book called Invitation to a Great Experiment, and Bill Wilson was actually Tom Powers' sponsor
oh,
back in the 40s. And he helped Wilson write the 12 and 12. So the
mm,
quote that we read at the beginning of this episode,
mm,
uh, it may well have been Powers who wrote that.
mm,
He and Wilson collaborated on this, but he was the silent partner. But what he
yeah,
said that really grabbed my attention was, if you don't watch, you won't know what the hell to pray for.
mm,
And that's what I think you're talking about here,
mm,
that there is a flow that leads us from self-examination
mm,
into prayer.
mhm.
Doesn't have to. It could possibly lead to greater anxiety and control and all of
Yes.
that. But if I follow it into prayer,
Mm,
it's where it needs to go.
mm.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does. This work, the work of self-examination, is too big for us. It's too
Mm-hmm.
big. It
Yeah,
requires a power that's greater than ourselves. The ego is, it can be a tough opponent, and it's not going to go down easily. And for people like me who tend to go into that self-pity, and this work can be so hard. Moving on to step 4, thankfully for me at that point, I had sort of this awareness and turning this, and I had this sort of relationship, although it was still distant.
sure.
Um, I was able to, but I noticed even in making my list, there were just moments where I really felt myself slipping back into that place. The reservoir of self-pity is what kept me drinking.
Right.
That
Okay.
fed my alcoholism and self-loathing and stuff. I mean, it's just the truth.
Right.
And
Right. So as you're
so
doing your inventory, you
mm,
you 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 can see that at work in yourself.
absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm going
Yes.
back to this self.
Yeah.
This self is going to write the inventory.
Yes, it was personal, but it wasn't, I didn't take it personally. It was work that was needing to be done in order to get, and again, this is where a sponsor, I mean, just make the list. just make the list, just put it on paper, sit down, don't think about it. Just, we're just kind of putting this all out there. We all know what it is. It's not like we really have to think too hard. We're all pretty aware of the stuff that we've done. And then it gets a little bit more challenging in step 5, where we have to start sort of naming people, and we get into those moments, those trigger moments, and we're having to talk about what happened, who was involved or whatever, and what happened. And then I love this step, this third column, where now we get into the instincts, like where is that hitting me the hardest? Like, is this in my relationships, in my finances, where is this really affecting me? Now I think we've gone from identifying the defect or whatever it is, and now we're getting to that next layer of, what is this really affecting? Like, where is this really hurting? Because the defect is a result of this injury. That is a direct result of where whatever has happened to us has affected our ambition, it's affected our finances, our sexual relationships, our and this is really interesting because you look across a lot of other spiritual paths, and Father Thomas Keating has these emotional programs of happiness. They are security, affection, and control, and several others. You can look at the sort of the 3 or 4 basic trigger points, if you will, of every human being. Like, what is that really affecting? That is affecting, my need for control. That is affecting my need for security, my need for affection. And now it's almost like that step 5 is the next layer, because we can get down to our fear. We're getting underneath, because this is all a result of.
Right. And then do I get that honest with a person or not? It's a critical
It's
juncture,
essential.
you know?
Essential. And then what, to make it even worse, you got the 4th column, which technically is not in our literature, but I needed to know it. And my sponsor was a 4th column genius, and I had to identify my part in that. Because what can happen at that point, we start to identify. It's uncomfortable. We're identifying the person, place, or thing, what exactly happened, and then where it actually affected. At this point, the ego is truly ready. It just is, it's exploding. Now we have to find our part. That 4th column is all about enough humility to do this work. When we accept responsibility, when we see, however small, our part in something, and it shifts the energy, now we need a power greater than ourselves to hold that, right? Because we're owning something. We're owning all of this other stuff. And I don't know about anyone else that was much more weight than I was able to bear on my own. It just was. And being able to ask for the help that I needed, and to lean in on some people at this point was essential for me.
Yeah, and 6 and 7 then takes us to whole new levels of how this operates within us, eh?
Yeah, we become ready, and I think that's there's a couple of great books out there. That Dropping the Rock book was huge for me, and but now we've got this sort of we become ready, and we do that by noticing them whenever they arise. Right? Once you do that deep work, you've sort of created, in a way, kind of this self-inflicted wound, but it's necessary. But when those come up, you've already done this deep work. That wound is there, and it's necessary.
Right.
But as soon as that thing happens again, boy, do you recognize it immediately.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, we start to do that. And then, and we humbly ask God to remove our shortcomings. Well, at that point, we better have some better habits and tools to rely on. I don't think that's possible for someone to have a character defect completely removed unless they have had a suitable replacement for that space. And so, at this point, step 7, right? I'm thinking for myself, I was probably 5, 6 months sober at this point, 5 months. I had a whole new set of tools. I had a whole new language. I was doing this daily work. And so I became ready, and I was able to humbly ask God to remove these defects of character, because I had at this point developed a whole new way, not practicing it every day, but I'd had this glimpse of what it was like to have this different way of being, this different way of behaving, this different way of thinking, this different way. And so, when I was talking to my sponsor about this idea of letting go, and I'm a monkey bar person, I am not going to let go of this bar until I've got another one to hang on to. And you think about monkey bars, right? When you're little, right? When we're thinking about letting go. In order for me to let go of something, I need to have some sort of grasp on something else, that
Correct.
idea. And so until I'm working on this new grasp, and I'm not even letting go, but I begin to loosen my grip. Loosening my grip is the best that I could do, and it was enough. And it was simply enough. But yeah, these 2 steps are all about how that is for each one of us. Because there's some that might be, a little more risky than I was willing to be, or might have not been quite as sick as I was. I don't know, but I'm only speaking from my experience.
Yeah.
So yeah, very helpful and necessary in this work of self-examination.
I also want to touch on, with 6 and 7,
Mm,
the concept of time, the concept of now.
mm,
Now you're saying I can't let go fully
mm,
unless and until there's something else to move toward.
mm,
Now, my experience in
mm,
prayer
mm,
and in time is that in prayer, it is possible
mm,
to let go at that
mm.
moment.
Yes.
And at that moment, the defect is removed. It's not operational at
Mm,
that moment.
mm,
6 seconds later, and even less, I'm fully free to grab at it once again.
mm,
That's my understanding of
mm.
6 and 7, that I think they're there for a reason, and I think they work. But they
Absolutely,
work
they
in
do.
the now,
Yeah.
and I don't live in the now.
Yeah.
But if I do live in the now,
Mm,
and if I
mm,
am connected,
mm.
and then it becomes a question of extending that through my day, through my life.
Yeah.
And I have not, in 50 years, had a full day of letting go.
Mm,
Haven't,
yeah.
have not.
Yeah.
And I've accepted that that seems to be the way it is.
Yeah.
But I have the opportunity.
Mm,
And either the program works or it doesn't work.
mm.
And that's what I've kind of come down to
Yes.
in the
Yes.
long term. It works, and
Yes.
these steps work.
Right.
And if they don't work, throw them away. Let's get
Right.
on to steps that do work.
Yeah.
So 6 and 7, asking to have them removed. Are
Mm,
they removed? Well, my
mm.
experience is yes, they are
Yes. Yeah.
for that moment.
Yeah. And so that absolutely is true. And I agree with that. And I think through practicing, right? That. And I think through practicing and letting go, we learn to let go more easily. We let go to learn more, and let go to learn readily. And I think through that, we don't have to do it quite as often. And so this is the same sort of practice in meditation, right? When a thought comes, we let the thought go, and we come back to the breath or whatever our anchor is, and we let that go, and we keep letting go, letting go, letting go, letting go. And that is that practice. I couldn't do that early on. I'm better at it now, but
Yeah.
earlier on, it felt like letting go was too hard and too scary. Loosening my grip, finding something else to sort of replace that with that felt safe, whether that was God's will, or maybe that was some other positive sort of thing that felt like a good replacement at the time. I don't know. And again, this is simply my experience. But that felt helpful for me. And yes, we let go every minute of every day if we need to. And in some of our other faiths, we always have the opportunity to begin again, right? Having that beginner's mind to
That's
be able
right.
to. And
That's
I
right.
love we get a countless amount of do-overs every day, and nobody's keeping score. Those are handed out. That is called grace. And
Yeah, and I'm living in it or I'm not.
yeah,
And that's the journey.
yes,
That's
yeah,
the journey. But I
yes.
think it's real helpful if we explain the map to people.
Mm, mm,
This is what it's going to look like.
mhm,
So you're going to hit
mm,
these two steps. They need to become meaningful for
mm,
us. And is it safe to let go? Is it painful enough to let
mm,
go? You mentioned
mm,
Richard Rohr last time. He says
mm,
two things powerful enough to change a person:
mhm,
pain and prayer.
mm,
Most people choose pain. And the pain will build up until almost we are forced
mm,
to let go.
yes.
Or the
Mm,
prayer can be sufficient and honest
mm,
enough
mm,
that it can happen there too. That's my
mhm,
experience.
yes. This
It's
is
a,
a
it's
great
a journey.
discussion, to have around. I'm so interested in hearing. I mean, to just have this as an open topic. We don't get a lot of 6 and 7 step
No,
discussion meetings.
short,
That
shortest steps in the big book, two
but how
paragraphs.
fantastic to go, how did that work for you? Because
Right.
again, I realize that there's some suggestions in this book, but they're all given to us as suggestions, and how God chooses to use those steps in our life is so personal.
Yeah,
And
and Wilson said in a quote that he put the four absolutes into steps 6 and 7.
mm,
That was a real awakening for me.
mm,
It put them in a wholly different light.
yes,
I can move towards honesty, purity, unselfishness, and love, or I can move
mm,
away from them.
yes,
You know,
mm,
and that's my day.
mhm,
And watchfulness, self-examination, mindfulness, the Buddhists call it,
mhm.
is absolutely vital.
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 Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that step, we're kind of doing any comments on 8 and 9, what happens there in the
Oh, goodness.
self-examination?
Yeah. So the thing about self-examination and all of the things that we are becoming aware, it takes really the two ingredients. And our book says this: it's honesty and humility.
Hmm.
If by some reason at the end of step 7, we have not already gotten a sufficient dose of humility and honesty, I believe steps 8 and 9 are there for that reason.
They're going to bring it, aren't they? That's what you're saying. Yeah.
Boy. So, as we ask for God's help in removing our unwanted behaviors, and the steps are also designed, right, for us to do our part in this process, right? So God is busy removing, and we're sort of kind of busy doing the step work and the things that it takes, right? I think in everything that we talk about in these steps, specifically each one, there's kind of God's part and there's my part. I truly believe that
Yeah. Yeah.
faith
Yeah.
without works, and we have to recognize what is ours to do and what isn't ours to do. Yeah, that making amends, it has a way of humbling us to make room for God's help. I think
Hmm.
that is absolutely true. And these two steps, I think, offer a new life of honesty, this release of fear, a new happiness. Of course, the promises, right? Start here. And I think those promises are fantastic, and I could sit and talk about them forever. But at this point, there is a dismantling, and I think when we look at the third column and the fifth, that those fears, those are security or affection or control, we're really now going to this person or people and making amends, recognizing our part, right? Offering a new way of being, offering a way of maybe being able to help or change that, although we can't technically change it. Is there anything that I can do? I mean, this is pouring, this is soul work. This is as hard as it gets, in my opinion.
Well, addicts don't do relationships. And that's what this is about, you
Oh,
know? And I'm not just talking about because this podcast is pretty much directed to people who've been around a while, you
mm,
know?
mm,
And 8 and 9, yes, you go through the process
mm,
in the beginning, but it's also a part of 10. Continue to take personal inventory. When we were wrong, promptly admitted it. And that ain't just to ourselves.
yeah.
That's a repeat of the dynamic that we've
Mm,
learned in
mhm,
8 and 9. That
mhm,
we still have to go to people because we don't do relationships well.
yeah.
And so if I have to have this self-examination. What's my part in this?
Mm,
What did I just do?
mm,
When I said this to my wife,
mm,
what was my part in that?
mm,
Look at it and then go and make the amend.
yeah. Well, isn't it funny how each one of the steps and how they're lined out, where one is the practice for two, and two becomes the practice for step three.
They're like
And
dominoes.
yes, and practicing step three gives us the strength for
Right.
practicing. And there's no coincidence there. It's brilliant,
No,
actually.
no.
So, yeah, what
Yeah,
practice? We get to
yeah.
do that, and then we're ready for step 10. Those
And
fears, it says right there, we won't
right.
fear these things. The promises are make step 10s, 11 and 12 available. Again, no coincidence there.
So in the morning, I'm usually too exhausted at night,
Mm,
but in the morning,
mm,
I look at how did I do yesterday,
mm,
uh, or where's my relationship. I mean, I use step 10 as part of my
mm,
quiet time in the morning. I've said this before, the only steps I work today are 10, 11, and 12.
yeah,
And every spiritual principle and practice of 1 through 9 is
mm,
contained in 10, 11,
yes.
and 12. So it's a
Mm,
heck of a lot easier to just try to work 3,
mm,
than to keep my eyes on 12.
yes.
Um, so watchfulness,
Yeah.
and I want to talk about that. You do yoga.
Mm,
You're very body conscious,
mm,
health conscious. I don't like lists.
mm,
I don't like check myself on 27 things. Did I do this yesterday? Did I do that yesterday? Blah 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 blah. It drives me
mm,
nuts.
mm,
I like to feel.
mm.
Best movie I ever saw, Star Wars. Is the Force with you or is it not?
Yes.
And that's my step 10.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
can't you feel it?
Yeah.
Am I connected? Am I not connected? Am I in the presence? Am I not in the presence?
Mm,
Am I doing my role in the world yesterday and today, or
mm,
have I not been? I have to realign. I need
yeah.
that, and that's what leads to the prayer,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the flow.
Yeah. And the book is pretty specific. And I think, it simply says that, all of this is the things that we do. It's uh we this is how we react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. So I
Right.
think I touched on last time. I think about this place that I have to live. There's this so 4 rooms in this house. This house is this is my temple. This is my body. The name of my
Okay.
business, My Temple Yoga. 4 rooms in my house. I have a mental, intellectual room, mental.
Yes.
I have an
Good for
emotion.
paying taxes and things.
Yeah, I have an
Yes. Good.
emotional room with the
Right.
emotional room. I've got the physical room.
Yeah.
and I have the spiritual room.
Right.
So there's 4 places that I check in with every
Right.
day, because when I think of sanity and I think of health, I need to have health in all 4 of those areas.
Mm-hmm.
And the book suggests that, once it's our spiritual maintenance, our spiritual fitness that sort of dictates the other 3. And that's not always the truth for me. But I love that the book says that. But I have a practice every day in the morning, and part of what I need to stay spiritually or fit and maintain whatever, to maintain my
Right.
spiritual,
Yes, yes,
I
yes.
need I need the mental check-in, I need the emotional check-in, I
Right.
need the physical check-in, and I
Right.
need the spiritual. And so
Right.
I practice all of those every morning as part of my morning time. And what I know is that, I tend to spend most of my time in 1 or 2 of those rooms. I like the emotional room, and, sometimes I'm spending too much time in the physical. But, it's the whole body thing, of course, I'm passionate about, simply because what the Yoga for 12-Step Recovery,
Right.
their tagline is, "Our issues live in our tissues." So that's been
Our
scientifically
issues live in our tissues. That's right.
100%, and it's
That's
been
right.
proven.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so for me, I'm one of those people uh, where it shows up pretty strongly in my
In the
body.
body. Right.
And I will tell you, my restlessness, irritability, and discontent shows up in my body
Yeah.
before anywhere else. That's
I
where I
can feel
recognize.
the tension in my jaw, you know? And that's something that's going on inside of my emotional,
Right.
spiritual life.
And the body does not have the ability to lie. We can lie to ourselves all day long.
Exactly.
We can lie to other
Exactly.
people. The body. So for me, the second most important relationship I can work on, besides my higher power, is the relationship I have to my body. And
Yes.
so, again, this all is about self-examination. When I started to recognize, there's the thought. There's the feeling associated with the thought. Aha, connected, always. Okay. Oh, well, whoa, where's that showing up in my body? Every thought has a feeling connected to it and a bodily sensation. All
Mm.
3 go together all the time. I
Hmm.
had one of the biggest breakthroughs in my recovery about a year into my sobriety at a Y12SR teacher training. And it was something, uh, a sexual abuse situation that I was holding in my hips.
Mm.
And it was through the practice of yoga that was released.
Mm-hmm.
And it's changed my life.
Mm-hmm.
But all the therapy, right? We go to therapy, we have a sponsor, we have ways of dealing, with what's happening here. We have our support group, we have our meeting group, we have our fellowship, we have our church, we have our family, our emotional support. How are we supporting the body? Because
Mm-hmm.
for me, it isn't a holistic approach to recovery if we're not addressing all 3. And the spiritual will naturally flow when they're in alignment.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Mm,
right.
mm,
So in your yoga practice,
mm.
you're doing some self-examination.
Yoga
Well,
originally it's a spiritual practice.
of
And I
course,
spent
yeah.
quite a bit of time in India, as you know, and um, just sort of testing the water for myself. And so for me, my personal yoga practice is a way of practicing the physical embodiment of the 12 steps, and especially 10, 11, and 12.
Right.
Um, this sort of way of I mean, for some, it may be like just filling the body with the Holy Spirit, right? What does that look and feel like? Maybe it's sort of another energy. Maybe you're aligned with nature or the cosmos or the universe. But we are such body-based people. And I'll say this, that most people coming into recovery, and I work with many, are extremely disconnected from the body.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely. It's
I think
critical.
it's a huge issue. And maybe at some point you'll have Nikki Myers, my mentor and friend, who is the founder come and visit about that, because she's a pro and she's really done the work around all of this. And she is in long-term recovery, and her story is amazing. And yeah, doing a lot about that. So whether it's yoga or something else,
Right.
becoming aware of how all of this is showing up here, and finding a way to treat that and to deal with that and to work with that, so that it's
Yeah.
not, yeah.
It's a growing, I mean, what is this spiritual experience, this spiritual awakening?
Mm,
It is the unification, the coming
mm,
together, the oneness of these parts that are so split. And we have to identify where we are more split. You know,
yes,
I was very much more in my head and not in my body at all.
yes.
And a large part of recovery was joining those two together. And I can still get trapped.
Yeah.
Sometimes my guidance is go work in the dirt,
Mm,
and I follow it, and I go out there in the backyard and I dig, and I'm maybe planting something or moving a bush,
mm,
but it is in the connection with the ground that I get rejuvenated.
yeah.
That another book would never do it.
Yes.
You know?
So interesting. I've said this for a long
Yeah.
time. I believe that the opposite of addiction is connection.
Exactly. Exactly.
100%. And
Exactly.
the word yoga
Yeah.
in Sanskrit means to yoke together or unite or
Right.
connect. And
Yeah.
so anytime we're doing that, we're connecting with a source.
That's right.
Nature does the same for me. That
And the
connection.
12-step slogan is our yoke is easy.
And we
Our
aren't
yoke is
yoking. And we aren't yoking because we're not
right.
alive.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. And we got to have fun
Oh,
with this
oh,
journey as
absolutely.
well.
Oh my
Serious as
gosh.
hell. People are
Yeah.
dying all around us.
Mm,
And I think the
mm,
12 steps, if they're presented positively in an alive sort of way, it's
mm,
an invitation to life, new
yeah.
life, full life, and
Mm,
wholeness, and not so much holiness, not a puritanical kind of thing, but people who are living life. I think that's what we're here for. So,
yeah.
listen, I thank you for your
Mm,
sharing today.
yeah.
We've looked at self-examination. Next time, we're going to have a session on prayer and meditation, because those are the other two legs of the stool.
Mm,
So I thank you so much, Tyler, for
yeah.
being with us, and I'll put your information again in the show notes, and maybe you'll send me. Does that woman you mentioned? Does she have a book or something?
Yeah, I'll give you the website
Yeah, give
and a
me the
contact
website, and we will
Yeah.
put that in the show notes as well.
Yeah.
So, listen, thank you
Yes.
for being here, and I thank you guys for joining us. I hope you found it helpful, enlightening, and namaste. See you next time.
Bye, Bill.